What if the simple act of closing your eyes, breathing deeply, and focusing on a silent prayer could open a doorway into the highest state of human consciousness? Have you ever wondered if prayer and meditation could do more than calm your mind, if they could actually connect you to something so vast, so divine, that Edgar Cayce himself described it as Christ consciousness? This is not just an abstract idea or a mystical metaphor. In one of his most impactful readings from the early 1930s, during the dark years of the Great Depression, Cayce revealed that prayer was not merely speaking to God, and meditation was not just about relaxation. Together, they formed a bridge to a higher awareness that could literally transform the human soul. He explained that this state, which he identified as Christ consciousness, was the true destiny of every person, an awareness that transcends division, dissolves fear, and awakens a sense of unity with the Creator. But what does this mean for you right now? Imagine sitting quietly in your own home, perhaps after a day filled with stress, worries, or uncertainty. When you enter into prayer, you are lifting your mind and heart toward the divine. But Cayce taught that if you remain still afterward, in meditation, you can allow God's answer to flow back into your consciousness. It is not just you speaking, it is the beginning of a dialogue. And in that dialogue, something extraordinary can happen. You can feel a vibration, a presence, a shift that Cayce described as the awareness of Christ within. This was not limited to church walls or sacred places. He emphasized that every human being carries this seed of divinity and can awaken it through consistent prayer and meditation. He went as far as saying that the very same power that guided Jesus could be touched by anyone who sought with sincerity, humility, and love. During one life-changing session in Virginia Beach, a seeker asked Cayce how prayer could be more than words. His response was striking. Prayer is the key that opens the door, and meditation is stepping into the room. Without meditation, prayer risks remaining one-sided. Without prayer, meditation risks becoming self-centered. But when joined, they activate what Cayce called the Christ pattern within us. He explained that Christ consciousness is not about worshipping a distant figure. It is about embodying the same spirit of unconditional love, forgiveness, and service that Jesus demonstrated. This was a radical idea at the time, especially in the conservative culture of the 1930s. Yet Cayce insisted it was the very heart of true Christianity and the ultimate healing force in human life. Think about this carefully. Cayce was not telling people to abandon their traditions. He was guiding them to deepen their relationship with the divine. He reminded his listeners that Jesus himself often withdrew into solitude, spending long hours in prayer, and then returning with a renewed strength to heal, teach, and guide others. If the Son of Man used prayer and meditation to align with the Father, how much more should we follow that same path? Cayce made it clear that Christ consciousness is not reached in a single moment of enlightenment. It is cultivated daily through discipline, patience, and sincerity. Each time you quiet your mind, release your ego, and open yourself to God, you're taking a step closer to that vibration of pure love. And every step has the power to transform not only you, but also everyone around you. Cayce often explained that Christ consciousness is not an abstract philosophy, but a living force that can heal the body, guide the mind, and uplift the spirit. During a reading in the early 1940s, while the world was engulfed in war, someone asked how one could remain at peace amid so much destruction. His answer was simple, yet profound. Turn inward. He said that when prayer lifts the heart toward God, and meditation opens the soul to receive, a person becomes a channel of peace. This inner state radiates outward, influencing family, community, and even the world. In other words, awakening Christ consciousness through prayer and meditation is not just for personal growth, it is an act of service. By attuning yourself to this higher vibration, you become an instrument of light in times of darkness. And those who have experienced it often describe a feeling of overwhelming love, like being held in the embrace of something eternal, something that dissolves fear instantly. But Cayce also gave warnings. He explained that not all meditation leads to Christ consciousness. Without the foundation of sincere prayer, meditation can sometimes open the door to confusion or self-delusion. He emphasized again and again, begin with prayer. focus on the Christ ideal, and then listen in silence. This is what aligns the soul with the highest. He described it as tuning a radio. If your dial is slightly off, you may pick up static or even harmful interference, but if you tune carefully, the signal becomes clear, and the voice of the divine can be heard. This metaphor still resonates today, in an age filled with distractions and noise. How many of us spend our days surrounded by static, news, worries, endless opinions? Cayce's message is timeless. Prayer and meditation, when directed toward the Christ Spirit, cut through the static and connect us to the only signal that truly matters. One of the most remarkable aspects of Cayce's teachings is that he connected Christ consciousness to healing. There are documented cases where he encouraged individuals with serious illnesses to combine medical treatment with daily prayer and meditation focused on Christ's presence within. He explained that the body responds to the vibrations of the mind and spirit. By aligning with love and peace, the cells themselves can be influenced toward harmony. While Cayce never dismissed medicine, he constantly reminded people that true healing comes when the spirit is awakened. In one striking case during the Depression, he told a woman suffering from a debilitating condition that her greatest medicine would be to daily enter prayer and then wait in silence, opening herself to the Christ force. Over time, she reported not only improvement in her health, but also a transformation in her relationships, her outlook, and her sense of purpose. This is why Cayce spoke of Christ consciousness as the destiny of humanity. It was not reserved for saints, priests, or mystics. It was available to ordinary men and women, farmers, factory workers, parents, and children. He believed that each prayer, each meditation, was a step toward a new world, a world where people would no longer see themselves as divided, but as members of one spiritual family. That vision remains as urgent now as it was during the crises of his time. As you hear this message, ask yourself, how often do I stop to not only pray but also to listen? How often do I allow silence to become the space where God answers? Could it be that the Christ Spirit is closer than I ever imagined, waiting patiently within me to be awakened through these simple daily practices? During his years in Virginia Beach, Cayce repeatedly described prayer and meditation as the two wings of the same bird. With only one wing, the soul struggles to rise. But when both are active, the individual can soar into the awareness of Christ consciousness. He made it clear that this was not a mystical escape from the world, but rather a preparation to live more fully in it. People who practiced daily would find themselves more patient, more forgiving, and more creative in solving everyday problems. It was as if their lives were being quietly reshaped by a force greater than themselves. He once explained that when you truly enter into this vibration, you no longer react to others out of fear or pride. Instead, you begin to respond from love, even in the most difficult situations. And that, he said, is the proof of Christ consciousness. Not visions or miracles, but the transformation of daily life into an expression of divine love. This teaching struck deeply during the years of World War II. Imagine families across America, worried for their sons overseas, struggling with rationing and uncertainty. In that context, Cayce reminded his community that the greatest power they had was not in weapons or wealth, but in aligning their minds with the Christ Spirit. He said that a single prayerful soul, attuned to this higher vibration, could influence an entire household, and that households united in prayer could influence communities. He was not speaking in vague terms. He believed this force was as real as electricity, flowing from heart to heart, capable of softening hatred and inspiring reconciliation. Today, in a world still torn by division, that message carries the same urgency. What if entire families, neighborhoods, or even nations turn to prayer and meditation with the Christ ideal? What transformation might follow? Cayce also explained the role of breath in this process. In one of his readings, he said that each breath is an opportunity to align with spirit. He encouraged people to begin meditation with slow, steady breathing, focusing on the inflow and outflow as symbols of receiving and giving. As you breathe in, you open yourself to God's presence. As you breathe out, you release fear, anger, and doubt. Over time, this rhythm becomes second nature, and prayer naturally blends with it. He insisted that this practice did not belong to one religion, but to all who sought truth. Yet for Christians, he said, the highest alignment is with the Christ Spirit, because Jesus embodied the perfect union between humanity and God. By following his pattern through prayer, meditation, and love in action, each person could awaken that same consciousness within themselves. Perhaps one of the most moving things Cayce ever said about prayer and meditation was that they prepare the soul for eternity. He explained that the habits we build in this life carry over beyond death. If you cultivate silence, reverence, and openness to God now, then when you cross into the spiritual dimension, you will more easily recognize the vibrations of Christ consciousness there. In this way, daily practice becomes not just a tool for peace today, but a preparation for the eternal journey of the soul. This perspective gave countless people comfort during times of loss. They felt reassured that their loved ones who prayed and meditated were entering a higher state of being, and that they too could one day share in that same light. It transformed grief into hope and despair into trust. Another dimension Cayce often highlighted was the relationship between prayer, meditation, and service to others. He explained that awakening Christ consciousness was never meant to stop at personal experience. True alignment with the divine always expresses itself in compassion and action. He reminded people that Jesus did not retreat permanently into the wilderness. After prayer and meditation, he returned to the streets, healing, teaching, and serving. In the same way, Cayce said that when we truly connect to this higher vibration, we naturally feel compelled to lift others. It might be through kind words, patient listening, or acts of generosity. Whatever the form, service is the outward proof that the inward transformation is real. Without it, he warned, meditation risks becoming self-indulgent. But when coupled with love in action, it becomes the very heartbeat of Christ consciousness. This teaching also carried a practical benefit. Cayce observed that many who committed to daily prayer and meditation with the Christ ideal reported greater clarity in their work, better harmony in their families, and surprising breakthroughs in difficult situations. He explained that when the mind is attuned to the divine, it becomes more receptive to guidance and inspiration. Ideas flow more easily, and decisions feel less burdensome. He sometimes described this as the soul remembering its true nature, reconnecting with the universal mind of God. For those struggling with confusion or fear, this promise was life-changing. It meant that prayer and meditation were not just religious duties, but tools for navigating the challenges of everyday life. In Hopkinsville, where Cayce was born, stories circulated of ordinary people who transformed their lives by following these simple practices. Farmers, teachers, and shopkeepers reported that their tempers softened, their outlook brightened, and their sense of connection to others deepened. Cayce would remind them that they were not just experiencing a psychological effect, they were touching the very presence of Christ within. He described it as a vibration, a frequency of consciousness that resonated through the soul and radiated outward. Even skeptics who visited Virginia Beach sometimes left struck by the peace they felt in the quiet meditation circles. It was as if the air itself carried a different charge, one that science could not explain, but the heart could recognize instantly. Cayce's message about Christ consciousness through prayer and meditation has continued to influence generations. The Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach still encourages people to practice daily, not as a ritual, but as a living experience. Modern seekers who follow his guidance often report the same results as those from the 1930s and 40s: healing, peace, deeper love for others, and a growing sense of unity with the divine. This enduring relevance points to a truth beyond time and culture, that the path to awakening is not hidden or complicated, but available to anyone willing to set aside a few minutes each day to pray sincerely and then listen in silence. Cayce also addressed the doubts many people carried when approaching meditation. Some feared they were not spiritual enough, others worried they would not do it correctly. His response was always compassionate and reassuring. It is not about perfection, but intention. He emphasized that God listens to the simplest prayer spoken from the heart, and that even a few minutes of quiet openness can awaken the soul. He explained that the act of showing up daily with sincerity, was more powerful than elaborate rituals or complex techniques. Over time, consistency creates a channel, like carving a stream through stone, until the living waters of the Spirit flow naturally. He reminded people that even Jesus' disciples struggled to pray at times, yet their persistence opened the way for the birth of the early church. In the same way, every soul can stumble, rise again, and gradually discover the stillness where Christ consciousness shines. One of Cayce's most striking images was the idea that the mind is like a garden. Prayer plants the seed, meditation waters it, and service to others brings it into full bloom. Without prayer, there is no seed of intention. Without meditation, the soil dries and the seed cannot grow. Without service, the plant remains hidden, never bearing fruit. But when all three work together, the garden of the soul becomes a living reflection of Christ consciousness. He used this imagery often during the post-war years, when people longed for hope and renewal. It offered them a vision of personal responsibility. Each person could tend their inner garden, and together humanity could cultivate a new world. Cayce also pointed to the scientific curiosity of his time. In an era when psychology was emerging as a field, he suggested that prayer and meditation influenced the nervous system, balancing emotions and promoting well-being. He never reduced the experience to chemistry, but he acknowledged that the body mirrored the state of the soul. Stress, fear, and anger left their marks physically, while peace, trust, and love produced harmony. Decades later, modern research would confirm what Cayce had said, that prayer and meditation lower stress, improve health, and enhance mental clarity. For those who doubted, these scientific validations became a bridge, showing that Cayce's spiritual insights were not opposed to science, but pointed toward truths that science would one day confirm. In the final years of his life, weakened by exhaustion yet still giving readings, Cayce continued to stress the importance of these practices. He often told his family and friends that no matter how many predictions, healings, or visions people remembered, the core of his work would always be this: align with the Christ Spirit through prayer, meditation, and service. Everything else, he said, was secondary. This legacy remains his greatest gift. And now, as you listen, you might ask yourself, what would happen if I set aside just 10 minutes each day to open my heart in prayer, then remain still enough to hear God's whisper? Could it be that in those moments, I would begin to touch the same consciousness that guided Jesus and inspired Cayce? That question remains for each soul to answer personally, not in theory but in practice. As Cayce explained, the awakening of Christ consciousness is not a dramatic flash of light or a mystical vision reserved for saints. More often it begins quietly, almost unnoticed, like the dawn spreading across the horizon. Day by day, prayer opens the heart, meditation attunes the mind, and small acts of service anchor love into action. Over time, you begin to see subtle but undeniable changes. Patience replaces irritation, compassion softens judgment, and peace becomes less fragile, more constant. This is how the Christ Spirit reveals itself, not as something foreign or distant, but as the deepest truth of your own being. Cayce insisted that every person, no matter their background, faith, or struggles, carries this divine spark. Prayer and meditation are simply the tools that help clear the way for its light to shine fully. Think about how powerful this message still is. In a time when so many feel disconnected, anxious, or overwhelmed, Cayce's words are a reminder that the greatest answers are not found in endless noise, but in silence. Not in running outward, but in turning inward. He showed us that Christ consciousness is not a theory. It is a living vibration available here and now. And just as in his day, this truth still has the power to heal relationships, bring clarity to confusion, and inspire courage in moments of despair. He would often say that when even one person awakens to this inner Christ, the entire world benefits. It is like lighting a single candle in a dark room. The light reaches farther than you expect. So now the invitation is yours. Ask yourself, will you give yourself the gift of this practice? Will you dare to step beyond mere words into the stillness where God answers? Cayce believed that every soul has this calling, and that prayer and meditation are the simplest yet most profound ways to fulfill it. Begin with sincerity, continue with patience, and let love be the proof. Because in the end, Christ consciousness is not something you chase. It is something you allow, something that rises naturally when you make room for it. And when it rises, your life becomes not only more peaceful, but also more purposeful, filled with a sense of unity with all creation. If this message has touched your soul, I invite you to take action right now. Commit to setting aside a few minutes today to pray, to listen, and to invite the Christ Spirit within you. And if this teaching resonates with you, help us spread it further. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe so you can walk with us on this journey of discovery. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and whether you already practice prayer and meditation in your daily life. I will heart every comment because your story matters. Together as a community of seekers, we can keep alive the wisdom Cayce offered, that prayer and meditation are not small acts, but the very keys to awakening Christ consciousness, here and now. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, revealed that the silver cord is not only present at the moment of death, but also during the mysterious experience known as astral projection. He explained that when the soul leaves the body in dreams, visions, or deep states of meditation, it is never completely disconnected. The silver cord, invisible yet unbreakable until the time appointed by God, keeps the soul tied to its earthly vessel, ensuring that we return after these journeys beyond the physical. Cayce described this as the safeguard of divine law, proof that the soul is eternal but not free to wander aimlessly. What does this mean for the way we understand dreams, out-of-body experiences, and the connection between life and eternity? If the silver cord is real, then astral projection is not fantasy, but a glimpse of spiritual reality. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what Cayce explained about the silver cord and astral projection may change how you view your own soul. And I want to know your thoughts. Leave your comment below, and I will personally mark every single one with a heart to show you that your voice was heard. Edgar Cayce explained that the silver cord is not only the mysterious link that breaks at death, but also the very safeguard that makes astral projection possible without danger. In his readings, he described how the human soul can leave the body during dreams, deep meditation, or heightened spiritual states, but it is never completely detached. The silver cord holds the spirit to the body like a divine tether, allowing it to explore the unseen realms and yet return safely. Without this cord, such journeys would end in death, because the body could not sustain life without the soul. Cayce insisted that this was not a theory, but a spiritual law, one rooted in Scripture itself. Ecclesiastes spoke of the silver cord being loosed at death, and Cayce extended that truth, explaining that while we live, the cord is what keeps us tied to our earthly mission, even as our souls glimpse eternity. He explained that astral projection is far more common than most people realize. Each night as we dream, the soul partially leaves the body, traveling in planes of consciousness that extend beyond the material world. Some remember fragments of these journeys as vivid dreams, others awaken with impressions of clarity, guidance, or even visions. What makes these experiences possible without the risk of death is the silver cord. Cayce described it as a channel of light or energy, invisible but real, connecting the physical and spiritual bodies. It ensures that no matter how far the soul travels, it is drawn back when the time comes to awaken. This was his way of showing that God's design is merciful, allowing us glimpses of eternity without losing the lessons of earthly life. Cayce warned, however, that not all out-of-body experiences are the same. Some occur naturally during sleep, while others are the result of spiritual practices or sudden shocks to the body. In every case, the silver cord remains the safeguard. When people report floating above themselves during surgery, accidents, or near-death experiences, they are describing exactly what Cayce spoke of. The soul can rise above the body, seeing everything with clarity, yet still remain connected. Only when the cord breaks does death occur. This is why near-death experiences often end with people being pulled back against their will. They were not yet meant to die, because the cord remained intact. For Cayce, these testimonies confirmed the truth of his readings. The cord is real, and it is the divine boundary between life and death. Astral projection, then, is not an escape from life, but a reminder of its sacredness. Cayce emphasized that the body is given for a purpose, and the soul is tied to it until that purpose is complete. The silver cord ensures that we remain in this world until our work is finished. At the same time, it allows us glimpses of other realms, where we may receive inspiration, guidance, and even healing. Cayce encouraged people to respect these experiences, not to pursue them recklessly, but to understand them as natural expressions of the soul's eternal nature. He explained that prayer, meditation, and a life lived in harmony with God make astral journeys more meaningful, opening the soul to divine influence while keeping it safe through the cord's protection. Cayce explained that the silver cord is the true key to understanding why astral projection is not only possible but safe when it happens naturally. He said that many people fear these experiences, believing they are dangerous or deceptive, but the danger is not in the experience itself, it is in misunderstanding its purpose. The cord guarantees that as long as life continues, the soul will return to its body. He compared it to a lifeline that divers use in the sea. No matter how far they swim, they remain connected to the surface. The silver cord works in the same way, a spiritual lifeline that keeps the soul tied to the body until its earthly mission is complete. His warning was not against the experience itself, but against approaching it without reverence, curiosity, and faith. He also explained that astral projection is often a way for the soul to learn. During these journeys, the soul may encounter truths, symbols, or even people that reflect deeper lessons. Some return with guidance, solutions to problems, or new clarity about life. Others return with warnings or reminders of responsibilities left unfinished. Cayce insisted that these experiences were not accidents, but part of the divine design that allows us to glimpse eternity while still bound to earth. The silver cord is the guarantee that these glimpses do not end our earthly mission too soon. By holding the body and soul together, it ensures that these journeys remain temporary, educational, and purposeful. Cayce warned, however, that astral projection should never be sought for selfish or purely sensational reasons. The cord cannot be broken by human will, but the way we use our consciousness matters. He explained that those who seek only thrills or power in these experiences often find themselves in realms of confusion, where selfish desires are reflected back at them. But those who seek truth, healing, or closeness to God find themselves in realms of light and inspiration. The silver cord does not choose the destination, it only ensures the return. The condition of the soul determines what it encounters. That was Cayce's deeper message. Astral projection is not a game, but a mirror of the heart. Another important point in Cayce's readings is that astral projection is connected to prayer and meditation. He described how sincere prayer lifts the soul, creating conditions where it can glimpse higher planes. Meditation, too, when practiced with humility and focus on God, opens the soul to realities beyond the material. In both cases, the silver cord ensures the body remains alive and waiting, while the soul explores. Cayce's warning was not to avoid these practices, but to approach them with purpose. When guided by faith, astral journeys bring wisdom and healing. When guided by pride or curiosity alone, they bring confusion. The cord will always bring the soul back, but the lesson it carries depends on the spirit with which the journey was made. Cayce also revealed that the silver cord functions as a spiritual channel through which energy flows between the body and the soul. During astral projection, this connection remains active, ensuring that the body continues to live even while the soul explores other realms. He compared it to a current of light, invisible to the human eye, but essential to life itself. This is why some people who project consciously describe seeing a thread of light connecting them to their bodies, shimmering and delicate yet unbreakable. For Cayce, this was not imagination, but perception of a spiritual reality. He emphasized that until the appointed time of death, nothing can sever this cord. God alone determines when the link is loosed, and until that moment, every projection, every dream, every vision ends with the soul's return. He explained further that astral projection often serves as a preparation for death itself. The experience of leaving the body temporarily gives the soul a rehearsal for the final release. Those who have encountered the sensation of floating above their bodies, traveling through other dimensions, and then returning often lose their fear of death. Cayce noted that this is because they realize consciousness continues beyond the body. The silver cord, by pulling them back, shows that life is not confined to the physical. When it finally breaks, the soul does not vanish, but continues its journey permanently. In this sense, astral projection is both a gift and a lesson, teaching us that death is not destruction but transition. Cayce's readings also warned about misunderstanding the purpose of these experiences. He said that some people become fascinated by the phenomenon itself, seeking repeated journeys without reflecting on their meaning. For him, this was a waste of a sacred opportunity. The true value of astral projection lies not in escaping life, but in enriching it. If the soul returns with greater love, deeper wisdom, and stronger faith, then the experience has fulfilled its purpose. But if it returns with only curiosity or pride, then the lesson has been missed. The silver cord ensures safety, but it does not guarantee growth. Growth comes from the choices we make with the insights given. His warning, therefore, was not against projection, but against ignoring its deeper purpose. Another important element in Cayce's vision was the role of the mind. He explained that thought is not limited to the brain, but extends into the spiritual body. During astral journeys, the soul carries with it the quality of its thoughts. A mind filled with bitterness or fear may project into lower realms, while a mind filled with prayer and love may project into higher ones. The silver cord guarantees the return, but the experience reflects the state of the soul. This is why Cayce urged people to discipline their minds, to cultivate thoughts aligned with God, so that when the soul leaves the body, it is lifted into light. In this way, astral projection becomes not only a mystery, but a tool of spiritual growth shaped by the law of cause and effect. Cayce explained that the silver cord also connects with the human aura, the field of energy that surrounds each person. He said the aura reflects the state of the soul, showing colors and vibrations that change according to thoughts, emotions, and spiritual growth. The silver cord is like the central channel that ties this field of energy to the physical body. During astral projection, the aura extends and the soul moves beyond, but the cord keeps the connection intact. This is why people who have out-of-body experiences often describe seeing their own bodies surrounded by a glow or field of light. Cayce insisted this is not illusion but perception of the spiritual truth, that the cord sustains life while the soul explores other planes. It is God's safeguard, ensuring order and continuity. He also linked the silver cord to the experiences people report in near-death situations. Many describe moving through a tunnel, meeting loved ones, or seeing a radiant light, yet still being pulled back to their bodies. Cayce said this pull is the action of the cord, a reminder that their earthly mission is not yet complete. These experiences confirm what he revealed decades earlier. The cord is the dividing line between life and death. If intact, the soul may glimpse eternity, but must return. If broken, the journey continues without return. Cayce's warning was that we should not dismiss these testimonies as fantasy, because they align with both spiritual law and his own readings. They are evidence that life continues beyond the body, safeguarded until the moment God decides the cord should be loosed. Cayce often emphasized that astral projection is not an escape from responsibility. The soul is not given the ability to leave the body simply for entertainment. Every journey carries meaning, and every return is a chance to live differently. He warned that ignoring these experiences or misusing them can lead to confusion. For him, the safest path was always through prayer and humility. If the soul seeks only God's will, then even its projections become channels of light and growth. If the soul seeks power or sensation, then the same experience can become confusing or even frightening. The silver cord ensures the return, but the state of the soul determines the quality of what it sees. His message was constant: approach every spiritual experience with reverence, because they are gifts meant to guide us closer to God. Finally, Cayce explained that astral projection and the silver cord reveal the dual nature of human life. We are both physical and spiritual, bound to earth, but connected to eternity. The cord is proof that we are not accidents of biology, but children of God, sustained by His design. Every night as we dream, every time we feel inspiration, every moment we sense something beyond the visible, we are reminded that the soul is greater than the body. The silver cord ensures we remain here until our mission is finished, but it also reminds us that this world is not our final home. Cayce's warning and encouragement were the same. Live faithfully, because your soul is eternal and the cord will one day be released. Until then, every glimpse of eternity through astral projection is a call to live more fully here and now. Cayce also made it clear that the silver cord is never to be feared, but always to be respected. He warned that those who attempt to manipulate spiritual laws for selfish ends often place themselves in confusion. Astral projection, he explained, is not about escaping the responsibilities of daily life, but about strengthening them. When the soul returns, it carries with it impressions from the higher realms, sometimes inspiration, sometimes warnings, sometimes deep inner peace. The purpose of the cord is to ensure that these lessons are brought back into the physical world, where growth takes place. Without the cord, there would be no return, no chance to apply what was learned. In this way, the cord is not only protection but purpose. It ensures that life continues until the work of the soul is done. He also linked the silver cord to the process of healing. Cayce often said that true healing begins in the spirit and flows into the body. During sleep or prayerful meditation, the soul may leave the body briefly, renewing itself in higher realms before returning. The cord allows this transfer of energy, keeping the body alive while the soul is restored. This is why some awaken from deep sleep with a sense of renewal, or why prayer brings peace not only to the mind, but also to the body. For Cayce, this was evidence that the cord is not a passive link, but an active channel of divine life. His warning was that to neglect prayer, meditation, or spiritual alignment is to weaken the harmony that flows through this channel. The body may live, but the soul feels restless until aligned again with God. Cayce often urged people to keep a record of their dreams, because he saw them as journeys of the soul, while still tied by the silver cord. He said that dreams often carry symbols and messages from higher planes, guidance that the soul brings back from its nocturnal travels. The cord ensures the return, but the responsibility lies with the individual to interpret and apply what was learned. Ignoring dreams, Cayce warned, is like ignoring letters from God. They are part of the same spiritual law that governs astral projection and death. The cord is the thread that ties the temporary and the eternal, and dreams are one of the ways it reveals this connection. For those willing to listen, the lessons of the night can be as valuable as the lessons of the day. Above all, Cayce's message was consistent. The silver cord is evidence that we are more than flesh. Astral projection, near-death experiences, dreams and visions are all glimpses into eternity, safeguarded by this divine tether. His warning was never to avoid these experiences, but to approach them with reverence and readiness. They are not toys or illusions, but opportunities for the soul to grow. The cord will hold until the moment God has appointed, but how we use the glimpses given depends on us. Cayce wanted his followers to see that astral projection is not fantasy, but a sacred reminder of what we truly are. Eternal beings, tied to the body only for a time, destined to return to God when the cord is finally released. Cayce's explanation of the silver cord and astral projection leads us to a greater truth. Life itself is a preparation for eternity. He warned that while the cord keeps us safe during dreams and spiritual journeys, it will one day be loosed, and that moment cannot be avoided. The experiences of leaving the body temporarily are rehearsals, showing us that consciousness is greater than flesh. They are reminders that death is not the end, but a continuation of the same journey. The silver cord is God's safeguard, ensuring that we remain here until our work is complete, yet giving us glimpses of what lies beyond. For Cayce, this was proof of divine order. Nothing in life or death is by chance. He explained that the true value of understanding the silver cord is not in curiosity, but in transformation. If you know that your soul will one day be released, and that even now it can travel while tied to your body, then every day becomes sacred. Every thought and action matters because it prepares the soul for the moment when the cord will finally break. Astral projection is a gift, but it is not the goal. The goal is to live with faith, love, and purpose, so that when the cord is severed, your soul rises into light without fear. Cayce's vision was always practical. Knowledge without application is wasted. To understand the silver cord is to live differently, with eternity in view. This is why Cayce's warning about the silver cord is still urgent today. In a world distracted by materialism, many forget that they are eternal souls. They live as if the body is all that matters, but when the cord is broken, that illusion collapses. Cayce's words call us back to reality. We are tied to this life only for a time. Astral projection, dreams, near-death experiences, these are reminders, not escapes. They are God's way of showing us that eternity is real, that our choices matter, and that death is not to be feared. The cord is mercy, giving us time to learn, to love, and to prepare. So what is the message of Edgar Cayce about the silver cord and astral projection? It is that we are eternal beings, given glimpses of the next world while still tied to this one. The cord is our safeguard, our proof, and our reminder that life has meaning beyond what we see. It will one day break, but until then, every journey of the soul is a call to live more fully, more faithfully, more aligned with God. If this message brought clarity to your heart, take a step now. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. I will mark every single comment with a heart to show that your voice matters here, and together we will continue uncovering the eternal truths Edgar Cayce revealed about life, death, and the destiny of the soul.
What if every pleasure you chase, every desire you satisfy, only left you more empty inside? Have you ever felt that moment when the excitement fades, and instead of fulfillment, you're left with a silence that feels like a wound in your soul? Write in the comments if you've ever experienced that emptiness, because this question goes beyond psychology, beyond religion, and straight into the very core of human existence. And it was exactly this emptiness that Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, addressed in some of his most revealing readings. During the dark years of the Great Depression, families arrived in Virginia Beach with broken hearts and shattered lives. They had lost homes, money, and dignity. Some had tried to fill the pain with alcohol, fleeting relationships, or chasing pleasures that numbed their despair. But when they sat in that quiet room, as Cayce entered his deep trance, what came through was not judgment, it was revelation. Cayce explained that no matter how much pleasure a person gathers, if the soul is neglected, emptiness grows like a shadow. And he pointed to something deeper, something he called Christ consciousness, as the only source that could truly fill that void. In one of his most impactful readings in 1932, Cayce was asked about a man who had lived a life of indulgence. From the outside, the man had everything: wealth, attention, sensual pleasures. But he confessed that inside he felt hollow. Cayce's words were clear: pleasure without spiritual alignment leads not to satisfaction, but to a hunger that never ends. He described it as trying to quench thirst with salt water. The more you drink, the more desperate you become. And here's where it gets even more striking. Cayce said this emptiness is not punishment, but a signpost, a spiritual alarm calling us back to the true purpose of life. Think about that. How many people in today's world chase what looks like freedom? Casual relationships, endless entertainment, the thrill of material success, yet wake up in the quiet hours of the night feeling restless, disconnected, or broken. Cayce warned that this pattern repeats across generations because humanity confuses pleasure with peace. Pleasure is momentary. Peace is eternal. And peace, he said, only comes when the soul is connected to the Christ within. This wasn't about dogma or forcing religion on anyone. Cayce's idea of Christ consciousness was not limited to a church or doctrine. He spoke of it as a living force inside every person, the divine pattern of love, compassion, and truth. When life is aligned with that higher consciousness, pleasures no longer dominate or enslave. They become balanced expressions of joy. But when pleasures are sought as replacements for the divine, the soul empties out, no matter how much the world offers. And here's something that surprises many. Cayce didn't condemn pleasure itself. He acknowledged beauty, love, intimacy, even material comfort as natural parts of human life. But he insisted that without the soul's alignment to the eternal, these things collapse into illusions. Imagine building a house on sand. It looks solid until the storm comes. That's how he described lives built on pleasure alone. impressive, exciting, even enviable, but fragile and destined to fall. In another session that changed the life of an entire family, Cayce spoke directly about this balance. A woman came forward, devastated by her son's choices, reckless living, indulgence in every desire, and a growing emptiness that consumed him. She asked what could save him. Cayce's response was piercing. The only cure for a hollow soul is to awaken the Christ within. No medicine, no distraction, no external success could replace that inner transformation. And when this young man began, little by little, to turn towards service, prayer, and alignment with that consciousness, the destructive cycle broke. Pause for a moment and reflect. How many of us try to escape pain through temporary pleasure? Cayce's words still echo. The purpose of life is not the gratification of the body, but the opportunity for the growth of the soul. That sentence, preserved in the archives, continues to strike at the heart of modern culture, where instant gratification is worshipped. Yet Cayce reminds us, every pleasure has a price if it's not guided by higher purpose. When Cayce spoke about pleasure, he didn't narrow it to just one dimension. He expanded it into 4 layers of human experience, and each of them carried a warning if pursued without spirit. The first and most powerful example he often addressed was physical pleasure. This included food, alcohol, substances, but also sex. Cayce described sexual energy as sacred, part of the creative life force given by God. When expressed through love, respect, and spiritual connection, it was healing. But when reduced to an act of selfish desire, stripped of responsibility or love, it left the soul emptier than before. He warned that sex without spirit becomes like fire in dry grass. It flares brightly but leaves ashes and ruin behind. Many who came to him admitted that casual indulgence in the body only deepened their loneliness. Cayce explained that this emptiness was the soul's cry for something deeper, union that is not just physical, but spiritual. Then he spoke of emotional pleasures. These are hidden desires society often overlooks. Craving for admiration, the thrill of being noticed, the pride of superiority. Cayce said that these were illusions more dangerous than physical indulgences, because they disguise themselves as success, or even as love. He explained that pride and vanity chain the soul tighter than iron, because they enslave the heart in endless hunger for approval. The applause may fill the ears, but it leaves silence in the soul. The third layer was intellectual pleasure. Cayce valued learning and encouraged people to grow their minds. Yet he warned that knowledge sought only to inflate the ego is sterile. He saw brilliant people in his readings, doctors, scholars, leaders, who confessed that despite their brilliance, they felt empty when alone. Cayce reminded them that wisdom without compassion is barren. True intelligence is measured not by arguments won, but by lives touched. And finally, material pleasure. Cayce lived through the Great Depression, when fortunes collapsed overnight. Families that once believed money was their foundation found themselves in despair. Cayce explained that wealth without spiritual purpose is as dangerous as poverty without hope. He said money magnifies the soul. In hands guided by love, it heals. In hands driven by greed, it destroys. Now think about our world today. We celebrate bodies, wealth, fame, success. Casual sex is sold as liberation, money as identity, entertainment as escape. And yet loneliness, addiction, and depression continue to rise. It is exactly what Cayce foresaw when he said, "Pleasure without spirit never satisfies." He wasn't condemning joy, intimacy, or abundance. He was showing that without Christ consciousness, even the most thrilling pleasures collapse into emptiness. With it, those same pleasures can become sacred expressions of love, balance, and joy. During the years when Cayce gave thousands of readings in Virginia Beach, one of the most common questions he received was not about money, not even about health, but about meaning. People would sit in front of him, sometimes in tears, sometimes in quiet despair, and ask, "Why do I feel so empty?" These were men and women who had tried everything: financial success, relationships, even escaping into the pleasures of alcohol or gambling. And still, they confessed, life felt hollow. Cayce's answers were consistent. Emptiness was the symptom of a soul separated from its true purpose. Without connection to the Christ within, he explained, every attempt to fill the void would fail. One striking case took place during the war years. A soldier returned home with honors, celebrated by his community, surrounded by family and opportunity. Yet he came to Cayce deeply troubled. In his reading, Cayce revealed that the man had drowned his trauma in casual pleasures, seeking escape in relationships and indulgence. The soldier admitted that the more he chased pleasure, the worse he felt. Cayce's counsel was sharp but compassionate. Turn inward, awaken the Christ spirit within, and then let your actions be guided by service, not desire. The man later committed his life to helping wounded veterans, and those who knew him testified that his emptiness was replaced by a profound sense of peace. Cayce often tied these stories to larger truths about society. He observed that during the Great Depression, when people had nothing, many turned inward and discovered spiritual resilience. But in times of abundance, when pleasures were everywhere, the temptation to forget the soul was even stronger. He warned that civilizations collapse not because of poverty, but because of spiritual emptiness disguised as prosperity. Think about that. In his view, the real danger of indulgence was not the pleasure itself, but the illusion that it could replace the eternal. What makes Cayce's insight timeless is how directly it applies to our culture today. We live in an age of instant gratification. With a swipe of a finger, you can order food, find entertainment, even find intimacy without commitment. Yet mental health crises are at record levels. Loneliness is called an epidemic, and millions confess to feeling more disconnected than ever. It is almost as if Cayce foresaw this modern reality when he said, "The soul will not be satisfied with substitutes." His readings echo like a prophecy fulfilled in the digital age. And here is something even more powerful. Cayce's language around Christ consciousness wasn't meant to exclude anyone. He saw it as universal. For him, Christ consciousness was the living awareness of love, compassion, and unity with the divine plan. Whether a person was Christian, Jewish, or of another faith, he described this consciousness as the true self, the eternal part of every being. That's why he insisted that no pleasure, no success, no external possession could replace it, because it was who we really are at the deepest level. There was also a reading where Cayce described the soul's hunger as evidence of divine love. Imagine that. Instead of condemning people for seeking pleasure, he explained that the emptiness they feel afterward is proof that God has not abandoned them. The ache itself is a reminder, a call to return to the source. He said that without that longing, humanity would lose its way entirely. It is the soul's pain that drives us back to the eternal. This is why he told seekers not to hate themselves for chasing pleasures, but to listen carefully to what the emptiness was trying to teach. During a session that involved a young woman in Hopkinsville, Cayce's words struck an entire audience. The woman confessed that she had pursued excitement in every form: travel, parties, relationships, yet admitted she felt more hollow with each year. Cayce, entranced, told her, "You are not empty, you are thirsty. But you have been drinking from a well that cannot hold water." That metaphor was repeated for years afterward, because it captured the essence of his message. Pleasure without soul is a broken well. Only Christ consciousness offers living water. Now, imagine bringing this into your own life. How many times have you reached for your phone, a drink, a new purchase, or even another person, just to silence the whisper of loneliness? Cayce would say that every one of those moments is a chance to remember. The void cannot be filled from the outside. It must be awakened from within. And the awakening begins not in grand gestures, but in small steps: service, prayer, meditation, acts of kindness, moments of stillness. He reminded people that when you turn even a single act toward love, you begin aligning with the eternal presence inside you. So the question comes back, sharper than ever. Is it worth the price? Is the thrill of pleasure worth the emptiness that follows? Or is it time to recognize that the soul's hunger is not a flaw, but an invitation to Christ consciousness? Cayce would say that the choice belongs to each of us, but the consequences are written in the very fabric of our being. And as history has shown through countless lives, choosing the path of spirit doesn't erase joy. It transforms it into something lasting, something eternal. Cayce often used simple yet piercing statements that left no room for confusion. One of his most quoted lines was this: "The purpose of life is not pleasure, but the growth of the soul." Think about how direct that is. It doesn't deny pleasure, but it strips it of the false throne we often place it on. For Cayce, the danger wasn't in enjoying life, but in mistaking fleeting joy for lasting fulfillment. And in many readings, he would add that the Christ within is the compass that shows whether our desires are building the soul or draining it. Without that compass, pleasure becomes a trap that always demands more. In one session during the early 1940s, a businessman came to Cayce exhausted and angry. He had built wealth, indulged in every comfort, and yet confessed that he hated waking up each morning. Cayce's answer was almost shocking in its simplicity. "You have served only yourself. Begin to serve another, and the emptiness will fade." That reading became a turning point for the man, who later redirected his resources toward community projects. His testimony years later was that he felt younger and freer than he ever did when he lived for himself. This pattern repeated again and again in Cayce's work. Pleasure turned inward decays. But when life is aligned outward in service, the soul comes alive. Let's bring this closer to our own time. Consider how modern advertising works. Every commercial, every image on social media tells us the same lie. If you buy this, drink this, travel here, or look like that, you will finally feel whole. Yet studies show that the more people chase these external markers, the more anxiety and depression rise. Isn't it uncanny how Cayce's words echo into our culture today? Pleasure without purpose leaves the soul restless. He said it nearly a century ago, but it feels written for this very moment. Here's the twist that keeps many people listening. Cayce didn't only point to the dangers, he pointed to the way out. And his way out was never complicated. He would suggest meditation to align with the divine, prayer not as repetition but as communion, and acts of kindness as medicine for the soul. He told one seeker, "Begin with 5 minutes of silence each day, listening for the Christ within." It wasn't about religious ritual, but about training the soul to hear its own eternal voice. That was his antidote to emptiness. Not escape, not indulgence, but alignment. And now I want to put the question directly to you, the listener. If Cayce stood in front of you today, and you confessed that your pleasures left you empty, what would he tell you? Do you think he would condemn you? Or would he remind you that the emptiness is the proof that your soul is still alive, still reaching for something higher? Share in the comments if you believe emptiness can actually be a gift, a signal, not a curse. Your answer may inspire someone else who is struggling with the same hunger. One of Cayce's most mystical yet practical insights was that the Christ consciousness is not far away. It is already within you. In fact, he said that every moment of true joy we have ever felt was a glimpse of it. Think about that. The laughter shared with someone you love, the peace of watching the ocean waves in silence, the warmth of helping a stranger. These moments are tastes of the eternal. The problem, Cayce explained, is when we confuse the glimpse with the source. We try to recreate the joy through pleasure, but forget that the source is already within. That's why he urged seekers not to chase the shadow, but to awaken the light itself. And this is where the contrast becomes undeniable. Cayce described lives wasted in pursuit of shadows, and lives transformed when people turned inward to find the light of Christ. He didn't deny the struggles, he didn't romanticize the suffering, but he showed that the only true fulfillment is alignment. Every other path, no matter how glittering, ends in the same place, empty. And isn't that the most haunting truth of all? To gain the whole world, yet lose your soul. Cayce saw it happen. He spoke it into countless lives. And he left us with the same challenge today. What are you truly feeding? Your pleasure or your soul? Cayce often drew a sharp line between what he called fleeting pleasure and what he described as lasting joy. Fleeting pleasure, he explained, comes from the senses alone. It excites, it distracts, but it fades like smoke. Lasting joy, on the other hand, is the natural fruit of the soul when it is aligned with the Christ within. He once told a seeker that true joy cannot be taken away, for it is not given by the world. That phrase has echoed across decades because it captures the essence of what we all crave: something unshakable, something real, something that does not vanish when the party ends or the thrill is gone. Think of the countless people Cayce saw during his lifetime. Some came broken, ashamed of their indulgences. Others came proud, flaunting their wealth or their beauty, yet admitting they were miserable inside. What shocked many of them was that Cayce never spoke with condemnation. Instead, he spoke with clarity. He explained that the soul does not despise pleasure, but it cannot live on it. Just as the body cannot survive on candy alone, the soul cannot survive on empty thrills. Both need nourishment, and for the soul, that nourishment was the Christ consciousness. Without it, even the sweetest moment would turn bitter. And here is where Cayce's voice speaks directly into our time. Our culture glorifies pleasure, casual sex as liberation, wealth as identity, fame as immortality. Yet underneath the surface, the statistics show something terrifying. Rising depression, broken families, spiritual confusion. Cayce foresaw this pattern when he said, "When the world grows rich in things, it grows poor in spirit." He saw it in the prosperity of the 1920s before the crash, and he sees it in our lives today. The emptiness of soul is not a new problem. It is the oldest truth humanity keeps ignoring. But Cayce also painted a picture of what happens when a person chooses differently. In one session, he described the transformation of a woman who had lived her youth chasing parties, relationships, and vanity. By her 30s, she admitted she felt dead inside. Cayce guided her not with harsh words, but with a path. Daily prayer, service to children in her community, meditation on the presence of Christ within. Within a year, her testimony was so striking that her friends hardly recognized her, not because her appearance changed, but because her presence radiated peace. She said, "For the first time, I do not fear being alone." That, Cayce explained, was the mark of a soul filled with joy, not merely pleasure. This story opens a door for all of us. What would it look like if we stopped trying to silence the emptiness with distractions and instead listened to what it was calling us toward? Cayce would say that the emptiness is a compass pointing back to the eternal. It is not failure, it is opportunity. He often reminded seekers that the Christ within waits patiently, never forcing, never condemning, but always calling. And when a person answers, even with one small step, the entire weight of emptiness begins to lift. So, let me ask you, right now, as you listen, do you believe your emptiness is a punishment, or could it be an invitation? What if the hunger you feel is not a sign of weakness, but proof that your soul is alive? Cayce's voice from Virginia Beach still speaks. The pleasures of the world will end in silence, but the soul that awakens to Christ consciousness will never be empty again. That is not theology. It is testimony, documented in reading after reading, life after life. And this is the contrast Cayce wanted us never to forget. A life full of pleasure but empty of soul looks glittering on the outside but hollow within. A life aligned with Christ may not always look spectacular to the world, but it carries peace that cannot be stolen. Which of these lives do you want to build? That is the choice Cayce left for us. And it is the same choice that echoes across time, waiting for your answer. Cayce often warned that the most dangerous illusion of all was believing that pleasure itself was freedom. He said many people confuse indulgence with liberation, but true freedom is never found in what enslaves the soul. Imagine the chain of addiction, whether it's to alcohol, money, lust, or validation. At first it looks like choice. At first it feels like power. But over time, it becomes a prison. Cayce explained that this prison is subtle, because the bars are invisible. They are made of habits, desires, and cravings that keep repeating until a person can no longer tell the difference between want and need. And here's the most haunting part. He said the soul knows all along that it is meant for more, but it whispers quietly, while the noise of pleasure drowns it out. During one of his most emotional readings, Cayce compared the soul's hunger to a child crying in a crowded marketplace. The noise of the market is loud, bargains, music, laughter. But the child keeps crying until someone listens. He said our souls cry like that when we fill our lives with distractions. We can ignore it for years, even decades, but eventually the sound breaks through. Some people mistake that cry for depression, anxiety, or dissatisfaction. Cayce reframed it. That cry is your soul begging you to remember who you are. And he insisted, time after time, that the only way to silence that cry is not with more noise, but with the still voice of Christ within. Think about how radical this message was in his time. The world of the 1930s and 40s was consumed with survival, war, and rebuilding. Yet Cayce dared to say that the greatest battle was not economic or political, but spiritual. He warned that if individuals and nations chased pleasure and power without soul, collapse was inevitable. His words sound eerily prophetic today, in a culture overflowing with abundance but starving for meaning. It is as if he saw through time and spoke directly to us, in this very moment. Now here's the turning point that kept his listeners glued to every word. Cayce didn't just predict collapse, he offered hope. He said the same soul that feels empty has the capacity to awaken instantly when it remembers its source. In one trance session, he described it like striking a match in a dark room. The darkness doesn't fight back. It doesn't argue. It vanishes. The light wins simply by appearing. That light, Cayce explained, is Christ consciousness. And the match is struck the moment we turn even the smallest part of our lives toward love, compassion, and service. Pause for a second, and let that image sink in. Your emptiness may feel overwhelming, like endless night. But according to Cayce, the Christ within you is already the flame waiting to be lit. The choice is not whether the light exists, it does. The choice is whether you will strike the match. And every act of kindness, every prayer, every moment of silence you dedicate to aligning with that inner Christ is a spark that pushes the darkness back. That is why he told seekers not to despair, even when they had lived years in indulgence. He reminded them that the light is always closer than they think. And here's the cliffhanger that Cayce left us. He claimed that the emptiness itself is part of the plan. Without it, we would never search for the eternal. Without it, we would stay asleep in our pleasures. The ache is what wakes us up. And once we awaken, we see that the pleasures of the world are not evil, but they are shadows of something far greater. They are hints, fragments, whispers of the true joy that only Christ consciousness provides. The mistake is not in enjoying them, the mistake is in worshiping them. So now the question presses even harder. When your pleasures fade, and they always will, what will remain? Cayce would say that only two things endure: the love you gave and the soul you grew. Everything else turns to dust. Every thrill, every conquest, every indulgence disappears. But the Christ awakened within you is eternal. That is the treasure Cayce wanted us to discover, and that treasure is waiting, right now, inside you. As Cayce often reminded his seekers, life is not measured by what we gather, but by what we give. Every possession fades, every sensation vanishes, but the growth of the soul is eternal. In his most compassionate words, he told people that even if they had wasted years chasing pleasures, even if they had fallen into addictions or regrets, the Christ within them had never left. It was waiting patiently, like a quiet friend who never abandons, ready to fill the emptiness the moment they turned back. This message was not about fear, but about hope. The kind of hope that transcends time, history, and circumstance. So let me ask you now, as Cayce would have asked in his soft but piercing way, what are you feeding, your pleasure or your soul? When the noise of the world fades, when the lights go out and the party ends, will you be left with emptiness, or with a peace that no one can take away? The Christ consciousness, Cayce said, is not an idea to believe in. It is an experience to live. And once you touch it, even for a moment, no emptiness can ever swallow you again. This is why Cayce's voice still matters today. In an age when pleasures are more accessible than ever, his warning is sharper than ever. But so is his invitation. He wasn't offering escape from life. He was offering the fullness of it. He was showing us that joy is not found in running away from emptiness, but in awakening the eternal within it. The question is not whether pleasures will tempt you. They will. The question is whether you will let them blind you, or whether you will let them point you back to what is real. And here is the gift Cayce left for us. You don't have to wait for a crisis. a collapse, or a lifetime of regret. You can begin now. In the next act of kindness. In the next prayer whispered sincerely. In the next moment of silence where you listen not to the world, but to the Christ within. That is where emptiness ends and fulfillment begins. So, I'll leave you with this challenge. If this message touched you, don't let it stop here. Share in the comments where in your life you've felt that emptiness, and what you believe the Christ within might be calling you to do about it. Your story could be the spark that helps someone else strike their own match in the dark. And if you found this journey with Cayce's teachings meaningful, subscribe to this channel, share this video with a friend, and join us as we continue exploring the wisdom that can transform not just minds, but souls. Because in the end, the greatest discovery of all is not in the world outside, but in the Christ consciousness already living inside you.
Edgar Cayce, the man called the Sleeping Prophet, described in his readings one of the most profound and mysterious moments of human existence, the instant when the silver cord breaks. This is not speculation, nor a myth created to soothe the fear of death. It is a reality Cayce affirmed repeatedly, echoing what the Bible itself records in Ecclesiastes, that when the cord is loosed, the spirit returns to God. But what actually happens in that moment? What does the soul experience when the bond with the body is finally severed? Cayce revealed details that challenge the way we think about life, death, and eternity. He explained that the breaking of the silver cord is not chaos but transition, not an ending but a passage into a dimension more real than the one we know. If this is true, it changes everything: the meaning of suffering, the value of time, the purpose of faith. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you are about to hear may forever change the way you see your own destiny. And I want to know what you believe. Write in the comments your thoughts about what happens after death, and I will mark every single comment with a heart to show that I read it personally. Edgar Cayce taught that the breaking of the silver cord is one of the most sacred and mysterious events of human existence. Throughout his readings, he made it clear that this cord, invisible to the eye yet real in the spiritual dimension, is what ties the soul to the body. While intact, we continue our earthly journey, learning, suffering, loving, and growing. But when the cord is broken, the body can no longer sustain life and the soul is released to return to God. This idea was not a creation of Cayce alone. It is rooted in Scripture, where Ecclesiastes states that when the silver cord is loosed, the spirit returns to the one who gave it. Cayce expanded on this, showing through his readings what actually happens in that instant of release. For him, death was not an end, but a birth into another dimension, a moment designed by divine order and guided by unseen hands. According to Cayce, when the silver cord finally breaks, the soul experiences an immediate separation from the body, but not as chaos or darkness. Instead, many feel a sense of lifting, of release, as though a great weight has been removed. The body becomes still, but the soul becomes aware of a larger reality. He described this moment as peaceful for those who have lived in harmony with spiritual law, though it may be confusing for those who have denied or ignored the spirit. In his readings, Cayce emphasized that spiritual guides and loved ones often appear at the moment of transition, welcoming the soul into a dimension of light. This means that the breaking of the silver cord is not experienced in isolation. Even if a person dies alone in the physical sense, they are not abandoned in the spiritual sense. The soul is met, guided, and embraced, because the release of the cord is not random, but part of a divine process. Cayce explained that the moment of separation often includes a review of life. He described how the soul, newly freed, can see its earthly body and surroundings, but also begins to perceive realities beyond physical vision. Some reported floating above, seeing their loved ones grieving, or observing their own body from a higher perspective. These accounts match countless near-death experiences documented later, where individuals describe hovering above themselves while still tied by a luminous cord. For Cayce, these were not hallucinations, but glimpses of spiritual law in action. When the cord finally breaks, the soul is no longer tethered and cannot return to the physical body. That is why near-death experiences end with the person being pulled back. The cord had not yet been severed. Death occurs only when that tether is cut, allowing the soul to pass fully into the afterlife. The breaking of the cord also signals the beginning of judgment, not in the sense of condemnation, but in the sense of truth. Cayce described the afterlife as a realm where nothing is hidden. When the cord is broken, the soul carries with it the record of all choices, thoughts, and deeds. It sees clearly the impact of its actions on others and feels the weight of what it has done and left undone. This is not punishment from an angry God, but the natural law of cause and effect, where the soul experiences the reality it has created. For those who lived with love, forgiveness, and faith, this review is a source of peace because they see the good they have sown. For those who lived in selfishness or cruelty, it can be painful because they face the truth of their own misalignment. Yet even here, Cayce stressed, God's mercy is present because the soul is always given another chance to grow and evolve. The teachings about the silver cord also shed light on why the moment of death can look so different from one person to another. Cayce explained that for some the breaking of the cord is smooth, like drifting into sleep. For others it is resisted, because the soul clings to the material world or struggles with unfinished attachments. In these cases, the separation can feel confusing or even frightening. But Cayce reassured that regardless of how it appears outwardly, the process itself is always under divine order. No cord breaks before its time. No life ends without God's awareness. The timing of the release is part of a greater plan, one that often cannot be understood from the perspective of the living. For the soul, the moment of release is both the end of earthly limitation and the beginning of a journey toward higher understanding. Cayce was careful to emphasize that the breaking of the silver cord does not destroy the self. Consciousness does not vanish. Instead, it expands. He explained that the soul becomes aware of dimensions that were always present, but hidden during physical life. This awareness is what many describe as entering into light, into peace, into a reality more real than the one left behind. The cord breaking is simply the removal of the boundary, and while the body returns to dust, the soul moves forward, continuing its eternal existence. This truth, Cayce taught, should remove the fear of death. If people understood that the breaking of the silver cord is not an annihilation but a transition, they would live differently. They would live with greater purpose, greater faith, and greater love, knowing that every moment here is preparation for that release. Cayce also explained that when the silver cord breaks, the soul immediately enters a state that reflects its inner condition. This is why he urged people to cultivate faith, kindness, and harmony while alive. The afterlife is not something entirely separate from this world, but a continuation of what has been built within. If the soul is filled with love, it will find itself surrounded by light and beings of love. If the soul is heavy with anger, selfishness, or despair, it will experience confusion and darkness until it learns to release those burdens. In this way, the breaking of the cord is not only a moment of departure but also a revelation of the truth of who we are. Nothing can be hidden. The soul stands exposed before God, and the life it lived becomes its guide to the world it now enters. One of Cayce's most important insights was that the breaking of the cord is not the same for everyone. He described how the transition can feel peaceful for a soul ready to let go, or painful for one clinging to the physical world. For example, souls who have lived with resentment, deep attachments, or unresolved guilt may resist the separation, leading to confusion in the immediate afterlife. But even here, Cayce reassured that divine help is always present. No matter the state of the soul, it is never abandoned. Spiritual guides are always near, patiently waiting to lead the soul toward understanding and peace. This was Cayce's way of showing that God's love never ends, even in the moments when we turn away from it. The breaking of the silver cord is therefore not a punishment, but a process of truth and growth. Cayce's readings also connected the silver cord to the phenomenon of near-death experiences, long before they became widely documented. He explained that in those moments, the cord is stretched, and the soul partially leaves the body. People often report floating above themselves, seeing doctors or loved ones around them, or moving toward a bright light. These visions are consistent with what Cayce described. The soul is still tied by the cord, not yet released. That is why these individuals are able to return. Once the cord is broken, however, there is no return to the physical body. The finality of death is not a punishment, but the natural completion of life's course. Cayce's words bring clarity to these modern testimonies, confirming that they are glimpses of a spiritual reality that has always been present. He also spoke of the sensation many feel at the breaking of the cord. For those who are spiritually prepared, it is often described as an overwhelming sense of peace, lightness, and unity with the divine. For those less prepared, it may feel like confusion, as though waking from a dream without understanding where they are. Cayce insisted that preparation makes all the difference. A life lived with prayer, meditation, love, and forgiveness builds a bridge for the soul, ensuring that when the cord breaks, it crosses into light with clarity and peace. A life lived without awareness of the spirit leaves the soul unprepared, but not without hope. The soul will still be guided, still be given opportunities to learn and grow in the realms beyond. This teaching changes the way we view death entirely. Instead of fearing it as a dark unknown, Cayce urged people to see it as a natural part of existence, as necessary as birth. The silver cord, he said, is like the umbilical cord of the soul, tying us to this world until the time comes to be born into the next. When it is severed, the soul is free, just as a newborn is free from the womb. The comparison is profound and removes much of the fear surrounding death. We are not falling into nothingness, but being born into greater reality. This perspective transforms not only how we see death, but how we live. If death is a birth, then life is preparation. Every action, every choice, every thought is part of shaping the soul for the next dimension. Cayce also emphasized that when the silver cord breaks, the soul does not instantly reach its highest state. Instead, it passes through stages that reflect its level of spiritual development. He described planes of consciousness where souls gather according to their vibration, each one finding its rightful place. Those who cultivated love, faith, and service rise naturally to realms of light, while those who lived in selfishness or cruelty may remain closer to the earthly plane until they learn to release their attachments. This is not punishment, but law. Just as gravity pulls objects to the earth, spiritual law draws souls to the level they have prepared themselves for. The breaking of the cord simply reveals where the soul truly belongs. For Cayce, this understanding gave urgency to daily living, reminding us that every thought and action shapes our destiny beyond the grave. Another remarkable teaching from Cayce is that the soul, upon the breaking of the cord, often experiences a panoramic review of its life. This is not a judgment imposed by others, but a clear and undeniable vision of one's own deeds. The soul sees the good it has done, the harm it has caused, and the opportunities it has missed. It feels not only its own emotions, but also those it caused in others. Cayce described this as a divine mirror, a moment when the soul confronts the truth without excuses. For many, this review is filled with comfort, as they see lives touched by kindness and love. For others, it can be painful, as they face the reality of selfishness or harm they never acknowledged. Yet even here, Cayce emphasized, God's mercy is present. The review is not to condemn, but to teach, to prepare the soul for further growth and eventual reunion with the divine. Cayce often warned against fearing this process. Fear, he said, was one of the greatest obstacles to spiritual progress. The breaking of the silver cord should not be feared, but embraced as a natural step in the soul's eternal journey. He taught that if people understood what truly happens at death, they would live with greater courage, with less attachment to material things, and with more dedication to eternal values. Fear of death leads to clinging, to resistance, and to confusion. Faith leads to peace, acceptance, and light. By living with awareness of the silver cord, one learns to prepare not by avoiding death, but by living life with meaning and purpose. The phenomenon of seeing loved ones at the moment of death is also explained through Cayce's teachings. He said that as the cord begins to loosen, the soul often becomes aware of spiritual beings waiting to receive it. These may be family members who passed earlier, guides assigned to the soul, or messengers of light. To the dying person, these presences bring comfort and reassurance, showing that death is not a lonely journey. When the cord finally breaks, These companions help guide the soul to its rightful place. This explains why many people, even those skeptical of spiritual matters, report visions of loved ones calling them before their final breath. Cayce saw this not as illusion, but as confirmation of spiritual truth. Cayce's descriptions of the breaking of the silver cord also addressed why some deaths appear sudden, while others take time. He explained that for some souls, the cord loosens gradually, giving them time to reconcile, forgive, and prepare for release. This can be seen in people who linger during illness, often using those days or weeks to settle matters of the heart. For others, the cord may break swiftly, as in accidents or sudden departures, yet even then the process is not chaotic. The soul is still met, still guided, and still taken through the same spiritual stages. The difference lies in the level of readiness the soul carries within itself. For Cayce, no passing was ever meaningless, and no soul was ever lost. Every release of the cord is part of a divine order, even when it seems tragic from a human point of view. He also explained that after the cord is broken, the soul may remain close to the earth for a time, especially if it has unfinished attachments. Some linger near loved ones, homes, or places they valued, not yet ready to move fully into the light. This is why Cayce stressed the importance of prayer for the departed. Prayers, he said, help guide the soul, lifting it, encouraging it to release earthly ties and embrace the higher realms. In his readings, he often told families to pray with love for those who had passed, not in grief that binds, but in faith that frees. Such prayers, he explained, strengthen the soul's journey, reminding it of divine love and supporting its transition. The breaking of the silver cord, then, is not the end of human connection, but the beginning of a new relationship, one built through spiritual support and remembrance. Another aspect Cayce highlighted is that the moment of release can feel different depending on how the person viewed life. Those who saw life only as physical may struggle because they feel they are losing everything. But those who recognized life as spiritual will see the breaking of the cord as entering home. This is why Cayce urged people to live with awareness of their true nature. The soul is eternal, and the body is only a temporary vessel. The silver cord is the tie between the two, and when it breaks, the soul discovers what it truly is. The tragedy is not in death, but in living without preparing the soul. This is the message that Cayce repeated often. Prepare now, not in fear, but in faith, so that when the cord is released, it is a moment of peace rather than resistance. Cayce also explained that the breaking of the silver cord is not an isolated event, but part of a larger cycle of growth. He linked it to reincarnation, saying that after the review of life and time in the spirit world, the soul may choose or be guided to return to earth for further learning. The cord breaks to free the soul from one body, but in time another cord will form when the soul takes on a new body. This cycle reflects the eternal mercy of God, giving each soul endless chances to grow, to correct mistakes, and to move closer to divine union. Far from being a moment of finality, the breaking of the cord is a doorway into the next chapter of eternity, one of many opportunities for the soul to evolve. Cayce reminded his followers that understanding the breaking of the silver cord should transform the way they live each day. He said that knowing death is not destruction, but transition removes the shadow of fear and replaces it with responsibility. If every action of the soul is carried into eternity, then each word, each thought, each deed matters. He warned that many people live as if life ends with the body, and in doing so they waste the opportunity that the cord was meant to provide: growth. The body is not the true self, but a vessel held together by this divine thread. To ignore the soul is to miss the very reason for living. The cord ties us here so that we can learn love, forgiveness, patience, and faith, because these are the only treasures the soul can carry beyond death. He also described how the cord's breaking can bring liberation to those who are prepared. For souls who have cultivated faith and lived with purpose, death is often described as being surrounded by light and music, as though stepping into a reality that feels like home. These souls do not cling but rise freely, carried into realms where suffering no longer exists. Cayce compared this to the moment a child is born. The transition may be intense, but the new world is vast, filled with possibilities the child could never imagine in the womb. For the soul, the release of the cord is the same. Earthly life was preparation, and now a greater reality unfolds. This truth, Cayce taught, should not only comfort the dying, but also inspire the living to prepare their souls. Cayce's teachings also showed that while the body returns to the dust of the earth, the soul carries on with clarity. Consciousness does not dissolve but expands. The breaking of the silver cord does not destroy identity. It reveals it. The soul awakens to its true self, to its eternal nature, to its connection with God. This is why Cayce insisted that spiritual practices like prayer, meditation, and service were not optional but essential. They strengthen the soul, clarify its purpose, and ensure that when the cord is broken, the transition is embraced with peace rather than fear. Life is temporary, but the soul is eternal. The cord is the bridge, and its breaking is simply the signal that the journey has moved to a new level. So what truly happens when the silver cord breaks? According to Cayce, the body sleeps, but the soul awakens. The earthly stage closes, but the eternal stage begins. Guides appear, loved ones return, truth is revealed, and God receives the spirit. The details may vary for each soul depending on its growth, but the reality remains the same. Death is not the end. It is a passage, a return, a homecoming. And knowing this truth should push us to live now with greater purpose, with stronger faith, and with deeper love. Because when the cord breaks, nothing of this world remains, only the soul and what it has become. If this message brought you clarity, I invite you to take action now. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments. I will mark every comment with a heart to show you that your voice matters here, and together we will continue to uncover the truths that Edgar Cayce revealed about life, death, and the eternity of the soul.